After we've thought about what we want our students to learn, whether content or concepts, and I think the two are actually quite integrated, and after we've thought about what kind of experiential component we might want, here I think is the key point. How do we knit the two together? We want to make sure that the experiential components are not simply grafted onto the class. We want to make sure that they are thoroughly integrated into the class, and I have found, and I think the research supports this, that they are best integrated through assignments that ask students to do the integration, that make the connections obvious to them. What can we do? Well, there are a number of you in here who do experiential stuff, so I'd like us to add to this list. But I have found, for example, journals to be extremely important. I have found in-class prompts to be extremely important, often asking them to compare, this is what you've read, this is what you experienced, explain to me the connection between the two. Is your experience challenging what you're reading, or is it confirming what you're reading? I also ask for integrative papers that do much the same thing at the end of the term. That's something that's important. Two other things that I would like to talk about. I always give students an assignment to go with the experience themselves. If I'm taking them on a field trip, they've got to use, who talked about city as text? The DC, okay. If we're going on a field trip, they've got an assignment, they've got to use the museum as a text, they've got to use the field trip as a text. If we do interviews of policymakers, I take some students to DC in an international relations class that I teach, they have to take careful notes, and every night we have discussions. Actually, discussions during the experience, very fruitful as well. So they've got to do something during the experience, not just have it. They've got to be actively engaged in writing and taking notes. I don't know what you found. I found my students don't like to take notes at all. They seem to think that they can just keep it all in their heads, and I compel them to take notes, much against their protests, and they act like they're being terribly abused, but I ask them to do that. The second thing that I would emphasize, I like to find a way for the students to make their learning public at the end of the semester. And here I'm very grateful to the person who mentioned websites. Was it you, Elizabeth? I'm grateful that you did that. I hadn't thought about it immediately. I wanted to talk about making their learning public. I have my students who are now, I teach a class on food networks, on the way that, how the choices that we make affect who we are, the wider society. The students who are doing research for nonprofit institutions concerned with food in the community, they have to build a website, they have to keep a blog of their experiences, they shoot film and they put it on their blogs, they put photographs, it's making their learning public, and at the end of the term, they have to do a 15-minute presentation on something that we call Watauga College Research Day. All of the students in our first year curriculum get together and watch each other's presentations. I like having them make their learning public and having them make the integration public. I found it's got to be obvious to them.